Hi, this is Grandma here, and I'm reading The House of 60 Fathers. And I began chapter 3. In chapter 3, Tien Pao discovers a group of children, and they appear to be eating grass. One small child is even eating dirt and mud, and he realizes that people are starving in that area. He also realizes that he has never seen any animals at all since the time he got off the sampan, and that his little pig is food. So he needs to protect his little pig. So he has decided to stop traveling, to do all of his walking at night, not during the day. During the day, he and the pig hide under rocks in caves that they partially make themselves. So I'm beginning in my book on page 47 in the middle of the book. It was a deep, dark night when Tien Pao awoke. He cautiously pushed away some of the leaves and peered out of the cave. The mountains lay in black silence. Tien Pao listened long. Then to his ears came a slight sound, and the blood started pounding in his ears. He clung to his pig. Something was coming in the dark. Came running straight toward him in the cave. Tien Pao's heart stood still. Long, frozen moments later, he began to realize that the soft running sound was the sound of the river. Why, of course, below the mountain ran the river. And then Tien Pao could manage a hollow little laugh at himself. He laughed at himself again, a little louder, and made him feel bolder. Now that he knew what it was, the running sound of the river actually made him feel safer. It was the river. Somehow, in running wildly away from the children on the grassy hill, he'd blundered back to the river. The sound of the river was good. It was a guide. He must never go away from the sound of the river, Tien Pao decided. Since he'd have to travel by night, the river's sound would have to lead him home. Oh, the sound of the river was good. The river had taken him away. The river would take him back to Heng Jiang and his mother and his father and his baby sister. Tien Pao mumbled a little prayer to the river god, the good river god. Bring me home. Bring me safely home. As if he could still reach home that night, Tien Pao grabbed the rope, pushed himself out of the cave, and pulled the unwilling, sleep-warm pig out after him. Together they started out through the little black mountains. 5 nights later, Tien Pao and Glory the Republic were still in the Little River Mountains. The going was painfully slow. Tien Pao forced himself up still another steep mountain path. His knees buckled under him. He had the little pig slung over his shoulder, but it was too much. He was too weak from hunger. But he had to carry Glory of the Republic. The little pig was not meant to climb mountains. The sharp rocks cut his feet. Grinding gravel dug between his narrow cloven hooves. His feet were bleeding. Now, if you recall, Tien Pao had saved a little rice to eat, but he had given it to the starving child. Tien Pao felt his way up the path. He pulled himself up by the jutting rock wall that loomed over him. His fingers touched a blade of grass. He tore it up to the roots and brought it to his mouth. The gritty grass under his teeth nauseated him. He gave it to the little pig on his shoulder. At least Glory of the Republic could eat grass. He could eat, but he couldn't walk. Soon Tien Pao knew he himself would not be able to walk anymore. The hunger gnawed too fiercely. It burned and gnawed all night long, every slow step of the back-breaking way. It never let up. It only dulled when, stupefied with exhaustion, he slipped in some little cave. Halfway up the steep path, Tien Pao had to set the pig down. Enormous, ballooning black spots came swimming before his eyes. He backed away until he felt a rock. He leaned against it. Cold, clammy sweat stood out on him. He pulled his eyes wide with his fingers to make the awful, lilting spots go away. Still they ballooned before his eyes, darker than the night, an evil dark. They were everywhere. They were above him, before him, huge, threatening, closing in on him. It must be hunger. It was only hunger. It was only that he was weak and dizzy from hunger. That's what made the spots. There wasn't really anything else. Tien Pao shook his head to clear it, but fear clamped his heart. He wasn't alone. They were still there, things on the path, spirits. Were these the evil spirits of the mountains he'd often heard about in his village? The old people kept talking about them in their horror, how they had hid in caves, oozed out of rocks. Now they were coming for him. And I do have a picture to show you of him walking with the black spots. I don't think that's really supposed to be fireworks, but black spots are evil spirits. They had waited until he was weak, but now they were everywhere, leering down at him from all the rocks, lilting, lifting, reaching out. Tien Pao tried to shake away the terror. They weren't real. It was only because he was so weak and hungry. They kept coming. Tien Pao tore his eyes away from the coming horror, looked down. The little pig wasn't beside him. Glory of the Republic was gone. Without a sound, they'd gotten Glory of the Republic. Now, who do you think they is that he's talking about? I don't think he means the children or the Japanese. I think he thinks that the evil spirits have come and gotten his pig. With a cry of terror, Tien Pao broke and ran. He ran with the mad strength of terror, blindly headlong down the mountain. The evil came right on behind him, rattling rocks, sharp, crunching gravel rolled at his heels. Tien Pao threw himself ahead of the rattling sound. He could hear panting. It kept coming at his heels. Tien Pao could not keep up his headlong speed down the mountain. He tripped. He hurtled into space with a great scary splash. He was flung headlong into water. Gasping with the shock, Tien Pao struggled to a sitting position in the muddy water. But water, mud. Then this was a rice paddy. But then he was out of the mountains. Then he was safe from the terrible spirits of the mountains. A rice paddy. Tien Pao almost lay back as if he were in a bed, so great was his relief. He breathed deep. All of a sudden, something nudged Tien Pao's arm. Tien Pao reared up out of the water. It was Glory of the Republic. They hadn't gotten Glory of the Republic. Why, it must have been the little pig that had come bowling on behind him in this wild flight down the mountain. That was why the gravel had rattled. That was the panting. Foolish with relief, Tien Pao sat back in the water and pulled the little pig into his lap. Why, all the time, it had been his wonderful pig, not spirits. Glory of the Republic was far more interested in the muddy paddy than in being gratefully petted. He squirmed free and grunted happily. He wallowed up to his nostrils in the oozy mud. Tien Pao fondly watched him and watched the pig. Watching the pig gave him an idea. It was easy to sit here in the rice paddy below the mountain and not be too afraid of the mountain spirits, but he had to go back up into the mountains. This was a rice paddy, and rice paddies meant that people were near. Tien Pao could dimly see the shadowy wall of a village compound looming up beyond the misty paddies. Japanese soldiers might be quartered right behind that wall. He had to go up. Maybe there weren't spirits in the mountains. Maybe it was only his hunger that made him say things that weren't there. But Tien Pao couldn't convince himself. He quailed at the thought of going up into the mountains. There was only one thing to do. Do what Glory of the Republic had done. Wallow in the mud. Disguise himself with mud and try to fool the mountain spirits so they wouldn't recognize him as the same weak, exhausted boy when he climbed back among them. Tien Pao brought up mud from the bottom of the paddy, plastered his face with the oozy, syrupy, reeking stuff. He rolled himself in it with bluish, vile mud, dripping from him. Tien Pao stood up and studied the little pig critically. He was encouraged. The thick mud must fool the spirits. Why, Glory of the Republic looked like nothing but a mud ball with 4 mud legs. If his own plaster of mud was as good, the mountain spirits wouldn't think he was human. They'd never recognize him as the same scared, weak, hungry boy. The mud was thick enough, but it was still a thin hope. Still, he had to go up. Quaking with fear, Tien Pao began the long ascent. But as he climbed, he realized he was weaker than ever after his mad, headlong dash, and he was terrified. There they were again, darker than the rock darkness, swelling, lifting, lilting, waiting for him on the upward path, reaching down for him. It was hunger. There wasn't anything in the darkness. "It's hunger!" Tien Pao yelled up into the mountains, and the rocks echoed it back. Far from above him, his distorted voice came mocking back as if something were laughing at him. "It's only hunger." Tien Pao whispered to the little pig, "That's all. There's nothing. There really is nothing." He kept whispering it to the pig as if the little pig had to be convinced, as if the pig were scared. It did not help. He could not force himself to take another step, and then he suddenly realized it. He was also lost. He was lost. In his wild dash down the mountains, he'd lost the guiding sound of the river. The river was gone. Instead, there was a new sound. There it was again, a rumbling in the valley, far beyond the rice paddies and the cluster of dim houses. Tien Pao tried to puzzle out that distant sound, but in the evil, brooding silence right around him, his mind was too numb with fear to think. He eyed the looming mountain again. Oh, if only he did not have to go up. The next moment, Tien Pao forgot the rumbling in the valley. A sleeping cuckoo called in a muffled, dreamy voice among the rocks right above him. Glory of the Republic was wrestling in loose gravel, snuffling out a cave where he could find leaves to eat. The friendly, homely sounds reassured Tien Pao. Again, the muffled cuckoo called, but now it was higher in the mountains. Tien Pao pulled Glory of the Republic out of the little cave with the friendly cuckoo calling above him as if leading him on. Tien Pao thought he dared to go up. It took all his strength to lift Glory of the Republic to his shoulder, but they had to go up now or he'd never dare. Tien Pao took one step up the steep path, and then he pitched forward. Glory of the Republic hurtled off his shoulder to the rocky path. The little pig uttered a short, piercing scream and was still. The sharp squeal of the pig roused Tien Pao from his momentary faint. There lay Glory of the Republic across the path, his 4 legs stretched out stiff and straight. Dead! Oh, not dead! Tien Pao crawled on hands and knees to his little pig. He blindly felt for the cave where Glory of the Republic had been rooting. He pulled himself and the silent pig inside. Oh, not dead, not dead. Tien Pao kept praying, but he could not force himself to make sure whether the little pig was dead or just stunned. He could not let himself think about the nights ahead without the little pig. To go on alone in the dark through the evil blackness and the silent, brooding mountains? He couldn't do it. Tien Pao kept frantically stuffing the mouth of the cave with leaves to keep himself from thinking. He hardly noticed that the leaves were wet and soggy. Dumbly, hopelessly, he kept building a wall of leaves. Behind him in the cave, there was a muffled sound. Tien Pao whirled. There stood Glory of the Republic on his 4 feet. He wasn't dead. He was eating leaves. Tien Pao grabbed him and babbled words into the little pig's twitching ear. He almost crushed him, Glory of the Republic grunted and wriggled free and hurried back to his meal of leaves. Tien Pao could hardly do it, but he had to stop the little pig. The leaves were so wet, they packed down so tightly, he had to keep every leaf for the little wall he'd built up in the mouth of the cave. Tien Pao pulled 4 handfuls from the inside of the wall of leaves. There, but that's all you have. He sat listening almost wistfully to the little pig gobbling leaves. Suddenly, he pulled a handful out of the little wall. He sniffed at the wet handful. Maybe leaves tasted better than grass. He closed his eyes, shoved some into his mouth. He smacked his lips loudly to make himself believe the soggy, musty mess tasted good. He swallowed them. They were bitter as gall, but at once they helped. For a moment, his fierce hunger left him. He opened his eyes. His eyes had cleared. The spots were gone. The ballooning, lilty spots had gone away. Tien Pao grabbed another handful of leaves. Almost at the same time that his hunger gnawings were stilled, Tien Pao became unbearably weary and sleepy. He couldn't force his eyes to stay open. He still tried to plaster some wet leaves on Glory of the Republic's head when he thought it must be sore from the fall, but the little pig promptly shook them off and ate them. Tien Pao stared hard at the little pig, and in a sleepy, heavy way, he pondered that the leaves might do Glory of the Republic even more good from the inside than from the outside. Before he had finished the ponderous thought, he was sound asleep. He did not hear the cuckoo call. And we have another picture of him where he looks like he's about to fall asleep. And the pig did fall asleep. So, I'm curious about the next chapter. It's called The River Cliff. And look at the picture that is in the front of it. So who do you think that's a picture of? Do you think that's a Japanese soldier or an American soldier? And I wonder if that means that he's going to be meeting up with a soldier in this chapter. What do you think? Let's look at some of the other pictures in the chapter to see. Okay. Let me see. I had another picture right here. Here we go. Does that look like American soldiers to you? I've never seen American soldiers other than in the Civil War or the Revolutionary War with cross straps. I'm afraid that's Japanese soldiers that he's going to run into in chapter 4. Well, we'll see the next time I read. Bye-bye.